Hello, my fellow humans, and welcome to the Multiverse Technology Podcast. What's the one piece of technology or tech trend that you think will most impact the way businesses operate in the next 3 years, and why? Today, I'm thrilled to have David Sobel. David is a recognized leader in technology services and the host of the popular Business of Tech podcast. With decades of experience as an IT provider, thought leader, and entrepreneur, he's renowned for making complex tech issues accessible and shaping conversations in the managed services industry. David, welcome to the show today.
Justin, thanks for having me. And I go by Dave. I'm not particularly formal. I always laugh. Mr. Sobel is my dad. I'm Dave.
Mr. Dave Sobel. Okay, Dave, gotcha.
I'm excited to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much. Glad to have you on here. If you could let our audience know a little bit about your journey, what you've been working on, and then also want to know about building and selling an MSP. What the hell is an MSP? I have no idea.
I was born in a small area outside of, well, we don't need to go that far back, right? But so I always sort of start my technology journey by saying I have a degree in computer science from William and Mary. So like I am a classically trained, both liberal arts person, but also a technical person. And if you'd asked me in college what I was doing, I would have thought I'd be like a product guy or writing software. And my career arc wasn't that. So I ended up in the late 90s. I rode the dot-com boom. I wrote a couple of startups up and down. And when the last one fizzled out, I needed a direction to go. And I lost my job and needed to figure out what was next. And I got the entrepreneurial bug because I kind of had this idea that I could run a company into the wall just as easily as those idiots at the top could. The arrogance of youth, right? So I launched, I kind of said, I'm either going to get some clients or I'm going to go get a job. Well, I managed to get some clients. And what we were doing was running their technology infrastructure for, small and medium-sized businesses here in the Washington, D.C. metro area. It was before we called it managed services. But the idea is to help companies with their technology needs. And rather than wait for things to break, you're very proactive and you put in software and you do monitoring and you do maintenance and you make sure that things run well. And that's the idea behind a managed services. Hey, I manage all your stuff and I do it as a service. I ran that business for about a decade. And I always describe it as a moderately successful regional provider because I didn't want to make my head too big. It was a good business. I loved running it. It was $1.4 million in revenue at its biggest. I had about 14 staff. We served like 60 clients. I mean, it was a good business. And then I had the chance to sell it and that somebody was interested in buying and I was interested in leaving because I'd hit a point where I was like, I'm ready to do something different. And I pivoted to selling software to companies like mine. I worked for a couple of companies, a pair of them, and helped them grow their organizations. And then about 5 years ago, I said I wanted to pivot again, that entrepreneurial bug. And I said I wanted to actually help teach technology companies in a more efficient way. And I launched a media company. I'm not sure that was a great idea, but here I am 5 years later with a popular podcast. We do a YouTube channel. I do news shows during the week. I do interview shows on the weekend. And I do live shows as well. So that like I do event coverage and all that kind of stuff. And my idea is really just to help technology providers and those focus on technology delivery by answering the question, why do we care about all the stories that I cover? So it's a bit of a career arc to tell you how I got to where I'm at now.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. I know it's kind of like sometimes we just go in up a zigzag line to get where we need to get to. It's not always straightforward. And that's okay.
It's funny when I look back, there's an arc through it, and it's about like helping people with technology. Like that's the common thread. But you're 100% right. Like it's like yes. I go that direction, I go this direction. But then when you step back, you're like, oh, there is a common theme to what I'm doing.
I find myself doing that sometimes. I forget to step back and look at what's common here. What are the commonalities? So I like that. We are in the business of helping people, helping businesses, helping people grow and understand what a great business to be in. We understand the tech.
More and more prevalent because 20 years ago, 30 years ago, like when I started in managed services, the tech was way more complicated in a way that most users couldn't understand it. But now that so much of it, we have
So
so many
true.
digital natives in the way that we operate, there's a certain level of technical savvy that you can actually expect from most employees. And what ends up actually being more important is, can I link the right technology to your business problem and show you how I did it? That's harder, but
Ooh.
it's where the real value is.
I love how you said that because I feel that's actually what a managed service provider is supposed to be, a strategic business partner. But so many of them get stuck in the technology part and not understanding that as a strategy, that's what to help those businesses grow, help them get where they need to get, and communicate that in the way so they understand.
100%. And that's where the future is. And so that's so
Yeah.
I lean heavily into that. Most of my, what I do now is about linking that and taking those technology stories and trying to put them in the business context. And I like to do analysis on all the kinds of moves, so that I can provide an informed, knowledgeable perspective to those that are delivering technology services, those that call the managed services provider, from somebody who knows a lot about this stuff. That's me. So I'm, so I try to lean into that and provide an opinion so that people can start from a place of knowledge. I don't need them to agree with me necessarily. What I want them to do is use that information to then execute on a business strategy.
I love how you put that. Execute on a business strategy. Yes, because if everyone agreed with you, then there'd be no point of even like talking to people. It'd be all the same things. We wouldn't really get anywhere. We wouldn't grow or learn.
And I know that if everyone's agreeing with me, I'm not being interesting enough. I haven't
Nice.
leaned into an interesting opinion, because if it's just something that's easy to say like that, then it's not as valuable.
I know I actually find myself in that kind of in my podcast sometimes. You bring on talk to so many of the similar people. You don't really go outside of that same direction. You're not growing, you're not learning more. You're just kind of staying in that little bubble. It's a little weird and fishy sometimes.
So, you want to, if you're a little bit uncomfortable, you're probably doing something right.
Yes. Keep hearing that one for some reason. The more comfortable you are, the less you're growing. The less comfortable you are. Like, what is that analogy? I don't understand it sometimes.
Well, if we knew and understood everything, life wouldn't be very interesting.
This is true. I'd like to ask you, regards to managed service providers, I know there are so many of them out there nowadays. A lot of them are very technical, but a lot of them don't understand how to really drive their innovation or business growth to actually being that business partner for them. Like, where do you think we went wrong with that part? Because there's so many technicians in this business, but not a lot of business strategists in the business.
Well, you've identified the problem. Right. So you've identified the problem correctly. So right. So cool. That is the problem, right? Is if you're leaning into being a technician, that's not the skill set that will drive business value. You've got to be looking at this from a business perspective. And you've got to be understanding the solution you're trying to solve rather than technology of how you're going to solve it. And ultimately, that's about looking at your customers and saying, I need to do a better job of understanding their business. If I can do that, I can then start identifying ways that I can help. This is the other thing about it that is you think about it from the essential perspective of, how can I help? I need to start identifying problems, and I need to start helping my clients solve those problems. And I always say, like, you can boil it down to a really simple statement. If I can show a business owner that if they can spend $1 and get $1.25 back, well, they will keep doing that. It's
True.
kind of that simple, right? And so you have to start saying, like, hey, I can show you how to solve problems. And if I can tie that back to, it will drive something in your business that generates more money for your business, well, then that business owner is just going to keep doing it.
I agree. I would keep doing it. I mean, be on track to just growth and scaling.
Right. So I mean it like, it's kind of that simple, yet I know how hard that is. And
Yeah.
sometimes you have to boil it down to, like, that is the thing that you need to do. If it doesn't answer that question, then it's probably wrong. And so keeping laser focused on that, on solving the client's problem, and making sure, by the way, you're also solving the right client's problems. Like, that's the bits that really lean into. And you'll have lots of people that are going to surround you, particularly if you're in IT services and managed services. They'll be pitching you ideas
Oh my
that
God.
they think are the client problem. That's great. They're not the client. You have to spend your time leaning into what the client and customer wants. And the more you do that, the more aligned you are to them and the more valuable you will be to their business.
Ooh, that was so powerful. And that kind of takes me back to before we got on this call, we're talking about cybersecurity services and how people are just pushing them. They're like, you need this, you need to have that, but that's not really solving the problem that they know they have. It's solving a problem
I
to
love
make
talking.
money.
I love talking about cybersecurity because I hate cybersecurity. Like I'm one of I and it. So and I always I have a really different perspective on cybersecurity than most, and I
Yeah,
want to start from the perspective of the pressures on the client. Let's start by acknowledging that on one side there are criminals who want to steal their money. That is immoral. It is wrong. It is illegal. I'm not advocating. Like I'm anti-criminal, right? But I want to start by that pressure on a business owner that there are thieves running rampant stealing their money. But on the other side, there is pressure from cybersecurity vendors to spend money with them where they're not necessarily invested in a shared responsibility of solving the problem. If you look at a lot of the end user license agreements of most software products in this
but
space,
you read those?
well, you should. You're signing up for responsibility, right? Those software vendors are not actually responsible for the outcomes of their software, right? And they aren't liable when things go wrong. And I like to think about this from the perspective of if I was sold safety equipment in my car. So, for example, I have a seatbelt and I have airbags and I have things that make it. If those things fail when I need them, the manufacturer has responsibility.
Yes.
Lo and behold, in software, we don't have that. So as a customer and as the service providers that serve customers, you have two sides of pressure here. You've got pressure from the criminals. Again, we're not advocating, we're not saying that's good, but we have pressure on the other side who are constantly telling you cybersecurity is the most important thing you should spend money on. When I go talk to customers, none of them think cybersecurity is the most important thing they should spend money on. They actually want to spend money on
100%.
growing their business, doing a better job with their customers, like growing their regional expansion, new lines of business. Nobody ever says, the thing I want to spend most money on is more locks for my doors. Like people don't say that, but the vendors in the cybersecurity community will always tell you how important it is. Yes, it is because they have a widget that they want you to buy. Now, I'm not crazy. I'm not sitting here advocating for a world of not investing in cybersecurity. But what I'm just saying is we need to be realistic about the pressure both sides are creating here. And if you want to do something smart, what you're actually trying to do is push back on the pressure. We should actively work on things that push back on criminals. Funding for law enforcement, for actually pushing back on technology, making sure our attack surfaces are smaller, making sure that we're not exposing things out to criminals. But on the other side, we need to make sure that we're not just buying into the hype and we're doing our things to make sure that we're investing in ways, particularly with those vendors that have some kind of shared responsibility model with us or that invest in that take responsibility, holding the vendors responsible that have defects in their software. Those are flaws. If they came out as cars and killed people, we would be concerned. Well, we have those flaws here and we should push back. And that's the way that I like to frame the cybersecurity conversation.
How do you think we should push back? It feels like they've created this silo where things just how they are and no one's really doing anything about it. Like we're not pushing back. How did we get here? How can we get around that?
Sadly, I have to bring up the evil world of politics, right? Because this is but what I mean from this is I don't mean it in the perspective of like, red versus blue and teams. What I mean is this is a public policy discussion. We need to talk about what responsibility everybody in this chain has. We recognize that criminals have responsibility to follow the law, and if you don't follow the law, we are going to prosecute you. But we also need to define what the responsibilities of manufacturers, and I mean manufacturers of software, have in their chain, what responsibility the client has, how insurance should work in this. And ultimately, I would love to see the dynamic of both regulation and free market find a balance that works for customers. And that means we have to have intelligent conversations about policy. In the US, we have organizations that help us, like CISA is one of the groups that we really should be looking to, that invest in that and they set policy, and we should advocate as MSPs. MSPs and IT service providers should advocate for themselves and for their customers by participating in that. And by the way, these groups, like CISA in particular, has regional offices. They want to talk to you. They want your involvement to understand like what the needs of the the community are, and they want that to be a conversation. So I mean politics in the policy setting terms, not in the red versus blue, we're going to fight this all out. It's like, hey, what kind of society do we want to live in?
MSPs versus cybersecurity vendors on the latest 6 o'clock news.
Well, it's fun to talk about it, and you're not wrong. But what we need to do is we need to align everybody so that there is a shared responsibility model where everyone is responsible for their stuff, but by the way, has skin in the game. Like, I'm going to really push back on vendors who are like, well, I'm going to sell you a cybersecurity product, but, there's no guarantees. And, if it breaks, well, that's on you. And, like that's not involvement. There needs to be there, and there are companies now starting to emerge that will put financial incentives in place to make this better. That where they will include warranties or guarantees or insurance, or they'll have co-insurance. Like, there are parts of this where it can be a shared responsibility model. And I think that's important to start pushing back on the vendor community around.
I like how you put that as shared responsibility model. Because, like, example, we have cyber insurance. It seems like, well, if you have that, you're covered. But yeah, if it's a flaw in the software, how does that fall into place there? Does cyber insurance still cover it, but it's not the vendor's
And
fault?
that should be defined, right?
Yeah.
Because my take on it is if the
Not
software
set it up
fails,
correctly.
right? If the software fails, I think the vendor should be held responsible for that. And I think we should be pushing that both with our insurance. Like, you can write that into a policy, right? And then, like, I mean,
Yeah.
that can be part of it. And the insurance agent can then go after the software vendor. Like, that is what should
They're coming
happen
after
here.
us MSPs all the time. Damn.
This really only happens when, MSPs, IT service providers, come together and advocate for themselves. And there are models for this. The National Society of IT Service Providers is one of those groups that is trying to pull people together and talk about doing lobbying and collective action. That's one path of doing it. There are several ways of doing it, but you can also do it with your own vendor. But you got to think about this stuff from the perspective of, hey, how do I want to balance this shared responsibility?
Ooh. I know MSPs have so many things on their plates. I'm sure a lot of them aren't thinking, oh, plus I need to do this also. I'm trying to figure out how to balance this. But it's kind of one of those things that, like, if you don't, what's the alternative? Your industry as a whole is just kind of failing itself, or you're failing your customers by not doing that.
I mean, I always sort of say, like, I always like to identify that in complexity is where the interesting solutions are, and in mystery there is margin, right? So the more things are hard, the more money there is, right? By solving it out, and being high value is because it's difficult, right? And that's where you want to look to. If it's easy, well, there's not much money in it usually. So we want to look for these harder problems. Now, again, I understand you only have so much bandwidth and you only have so much time to work on things, but you want to look at problems not just necessarily from the perspective of, like, well, how easy is this? I actually want to have a couple of hard problems in my coffin that I'm working on, because those are the ones that deliver high value.
I love that, because, like, if you put that time into that, it's kind of like when you go into managed services, like, oh, this is so easy to set up, this is so easy to do, but you find and solve that problem for MSPs, you could be that go-to for other MSPs or help them solve it.
Yep. And by the way, to be fair, like, some of the vendors are starting to identify this, right? The ones I mentioned, that there are ones that are now doing co-insurance, or that are putting
Yeah.
warranties around this. And, like, you as an MSP should reward the vendors that are more leaning into shared responsibility, and you should stop doing business with the ones that are not, right? And and that is one of the ways that you put pressure into that. And by the way, that's also why you join organizations and you have conversations with them about what your group requirements are, and but making sure that you're part of a larger organization. Have those conversations, talk with your distributor, talk with your peer groups, talk with your community organizations. The again, I mentioned, like, the National Society or the
Yeah.
TTIA. Like, there's lots of organizations that you can make this a priority with and help drive the conversation. So I just like reframing the cybersecurity conversation, because ultimately this isn't just about selling more products out to customers. We've always talked about it from a risk management perspective. We need to actually be realistic about what the pressures are on the customer. And the pressure is not just from the cyber criminals, it's also from the vendor side, who's trying to extract as much value as they can, where in some cases not take responsibility for the defects that they've created.
That, to me, right there, has been stressful in me starting my MSP, A lot of those kind of vendors I don't want to work with. I want to work with ones that have the customer, the human centric focus in mind to actually want to do the right thing, want to drive business, not just make profits. But there's so many
And
of them
understand
knocking on your door. Like, yeah,
100%. And
yeah,
understand the more vendors you work with, the larger attack surface you have, right? So one of the things that you can
mm,
do is simplify your organization by understanding the less is more, right? And so you want to make sure that you are focused on just adding the toolkits that really do add value so that you do not have too many tools and too much tool sprawl, and you are managing the risk for your clients, and that is part of the math to do, is understand what all the pressure are. We're trying to offset the pressure from the criminals, but we don't want to overdo it on the commitments from the other side where there is pressure from the cybersecurity community.
I feel that's I call it shiny object syndrome. Like when I first started my MSP, I'm like, ooh, I need this, I need that, ooh, I want this, I need this. And you get this whole stack, and you're like, well, what if one of them gets hacked? What if something happens? Am I providing value? Am I putting them more at risk? Oh, good Lord.
Right. And by the way, I've introduced more complexity that I then have to manage on behalf of the
Yeah,
customer, and there's more opportunity for error. And so that's where there really is, you have to balance that thought of like, hey, how can we do a better job for our customers? Again, always putting the customer at the center of the conversation. What
yeah.
is exactly what the customer needs, and not an extra bit more, because that is adding risk and cost, and we're not able to hit. If we're trying to drive that bid where we're showing an extra, 25 cents on every dollar
Yeah.
spent, I got to make sure that every dollar they spend is spent well. And by the way, I want to keep my portion of it, right? So you need to make sure that you're really thinking about this from the perspective of like, hey, I want to make sure that I am advocating for my customer. I'm spending their money incredibly wisely, making sure that they're getting the ROI while at the same time I'm also getting the profit out of that. That alignment is where the magic happens.
Ooh, I love how you said that, the alignment, because like sometimes you have MSPs, they're like, well, I'm not sure how to do this. I just know how to do the technology, but I know I need to be better and serve them. But sometimes they don't understand how to have those conversations, or how to bring those up with them, or how to navigate them. There's like, I just want I can protect you, that's it. But there's actually more complexity to that. You're
Mhm.
managing the risk. It's a lot sometimes being a managed service provider. Like we've said before, it's one of those businesses that I feel if you can start an MSP and run and manage and be able to scale and sell, you can pretty much run almost any other business, I feel. There's so much.
It's a very tough business. I mean, I love it, but I don't want people to come into this space and think,
This
oh,
is
this is
easy.
just like,
Whee!
it's easy. You're just going to clean up. There's tons of money, and by the way, this space is maturing. I wouldn't necessarily
Yes.
say it's fully mature, but it's maturing enough that there are established players and competitive pressures. It's not like you're walking in and it's a green field of opportunity and no one has ever talked to a managed services provider before. There's stuff to think about from this perspective. And so, I like to look at it from the perspective of, if I was starting a new one today, what would it look like? Because I think that's a really interesting exercise
I
to
like
always
that.
spend a little time thinking about what a fresh one looks like, where I'd lean into, where I wouldn't lean into, because that's theoretically your hardest competitor is somebody without any of the baggage of 20 years of doing it, who
Mm,
doesn't have the innovator's dilemma of trying to pivot their existing business to something new because they're already doing that new thing.
I like that. Yeah, they're like stuck in their old ways and they just have no innovation sometimes. Let's go back to what you just said. So let's say I'm an MSP. I'm going to start one today. And I also have to keep my customers' business in mind, also implementing stuff like AI products. There's some things that you would do and wouldn't do, and steps that people can take if they were starting that MSP today.
So let's separate out what if I was starting an MSP today fresh versus the idea of converting an existing one. And you mentioned like,
Okay.
I've got to think about my clients, because by the way, the pure exercise helps us think about what we might transform into. And then we have to figure out what the legacy problems are. But the pure like, hey, if I was starting fresh, what would it look like?
Yeah.
Because I think that's a useful framing to say, okay, Justin, you and I are now going into business. We're starting a new thing. We're going to start right. We've got our. I think I would actually start from the place of, it's not necessarily a managed services provider, because I feel like there's a lot of legacy baggage of infrastructure
Oh,
that
yeah.
isn't necessarily the place that I want to start from. Because I think right now the biggest value in technology services for most businesses is in what I like to describe as the productivity layer, right? So it's the idea of how they do business and how we can infuse technology into it to make that better. This generally looks like workflows, right? So like we're working on how do they implement their workflow in the business. This is an exciting time to be looking at technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning in this space. What we used to talk about robotic process automation, now it's kind of evolving into agentic AI. There's
Yes.
still a lot of early days here. I don't want to overpromise, but thinking about the way customers use their information, their data, and how they can deploy it in workflows, I think is the highest value stuff because it touches how they make money. And if we infuse it with technology, can we infuse it with e-commerce to make it more available for them to sell more? Can we infuse it with that nice levels of automation so that it moves faster and that their existing people can do more? Can we make it where, we're moving away from paper processes to digital ones so that they be enabled? Like that layer of stuff, super valuable. By the way, security is embedded in that, right? Because we need to make sure that we're doing it in a way that we're not exposing them more risk. That's the area that I want to focus on. And then I have to think about, okay, I'm building that business. You know what my actual hires are there more is people with business analysis skills. Those
Ooh.
business analysts who can come in and say, I can help understand your business and I can understand where the problems are. And they have to be infused with technology expertise, right? So that's why, it's the evil word of consulting. I get it. But that's the classic consulting model is somebody who's smart on business, smart on technology, can bring the two together and look at it. And if I can systemize that and deliver it as an ongoing service, and we're doing you can see the themes. Hey, we're going to do some projects to make you better. We're going to do monitoring and maintenance to make sure that that productivity layer runs really well. Like you immediately say, that's a business that has the project work, which is great to get in the door, and it has the ongoing monitoring, management, and maintenance and data security piece that they're going to pay for that brings me my recurring revenue. Like that looks like a really nice business to me.
I love that. So you're coming in as a business. You never said anything really about technology throughout that whole time, but coming in as a business, helping
Well,
that.
we do business analysis, right? So we look at your
Yes.
business and we help you understand, hey, I understand your workflows. I am looking at how the work
Yes.
gets done. And what I'm doing is I'm looking to infuse technology into that to make the process better. We can think about old school, simple solutions are always kind of nice. Think about the flower shop, right? Like the old school flower shop where, they've got a cash register and they're doing everything with paper and they got a customer. If you can think about the classic conversion of that to move them from a pen and paper type business to where this is managed electronically and they're managing it, and then they go take it
1-800
to their
flowers.
website. Right. And we can make their point of sale system all tie together, and we can sell flowers on the web, and we can make sure that their reach gets larger. That helps expand their business. By the way, we've got to protect all their data. We've got to make sure it's all done securely. That work, super valuable, right? That's the bit and I like this simple example. And I know there's listeners going, well, a lot of them have done that. Yeah, but a lot haven't, right? There's a lot of businesses that have not gone through, and I hate the term, but it's not wrong, the digital transformation, right? They have
Oh, a
not
lot of
actually
them.
looked at, right. A lot of them have not done that work. And it's consultant speak. I get it. That's not what I want to lean into, but the idea is right. How do we help them transform their business using technology? That work is super valuable. Focus there.
Ooh, I love that. A lot of people I talk to, they don't understand what MSPs actually can do for them. Because a lot of us approach it, like you said, as the technology, as the cyber, as the compliance. How do we get our clients we want and people out there to understand that we're more of a strategic business partner and the technology comes second, or like you said, it embeds into that piece? How
So
do we? Because they think
yeah,
we're some reactive technology company. They only need us when something happens.
well, so it's about thinking about consultative sales, right? So I got to talk a little sales process here, right? So you have to
Yes.
lean into the idea of being a consultative salesperson. I know most people that come from an engineering background get all cringy when they think about sales, right? But what they need is right. But what I want to redefine it to you is you're in the business of helping people, right?
Yes.
Okay. The best way to do that is ask them a bunch of questions, listen a lot, understand them, and then try and help them. That's called a sales process.
Wait, that sounds so simple. And the reframe is just so amazing.
Well, simplicity helps sometimes, right? So, what you really need to do is spend a lot less time talking about you and spend a lot more time listening to them and being of value to them. And what I want you to think about this is that you need to think about your marketing efforts is how can I throw value into the world that shows we know what we're doing, right? We're going to throw a lot of value into the world. And
You
we're going
get
to just
value.
keep
You get value. You get value. Everyone gets value.
Everyone gets value. Because by the way, the moment, think about it this way. If you're getting a lot of value from somebody and you're not paying them for it, your immediate first thought is going to be, I bet I get a lot more value if I paid for it.
What can I get?
Like,
Shoot.
it's
Tell me more.
actually marketing is kind of that simple. Like, I'm going to throw a lot of value out there because the more value I throw out, they'll go, hey, if I paid for it, I bet there's even more value. That's ultimately the trick. So you want to think about your marketing efforts as just how do I throw my value out into the world so that I can get people's attention? And that will draw them in so that they will start talking to me. And then I can start asking them questions to understand how I can help them. That's your process.
I love that because I just started learning that myself because I was doing it the opposite way when I first started out. I'm like, you need this technology. I can do this for you. I finally started learning from what you just said. I'm like, it kind of changed how I approached people, how I came off to them, just kind of helping their business, help them bring value to them.
Yeah,
I love
just
that.
be really valuable. And by the way, the more you're valuable, they tell their friends, they start the referral, and by the way, this solves the classic, how do they find me online? Well, if you're the most valuable online, people find you. I kind of laugh and go like, look, there are techniques to this and we can have the SEO people on, yell at me all that kind of time. But ultimately, I sort of smile and go, if you're valuable and throwing unique value out into the world and helping people, that will get found. That's the point of like search engine optimization, or even now artificial intelligence optimization, where like they're talking about AEO is a new thing that's coming out there, right? But ultimately, what those things are looking for is like, what are the best sources? So be the best source. Right? Like
Yeah.
if you lean into that, and by the way, that doesn't have to mean you're the worldwide best source. What that means is in your corner of the universe, you're the best source. And if that means like I live in Northern Virginia, right? If Northern Virginia, I'm the best source in my area for it, that's good enough, right? Or in your
Yeah.
need. Like I lean into, for those that are looking at me, I lean into trying to be one of the best sources of information on IT services and managed services delivery. I just try and be super valuable. Right. And hope like
Yeah.
that. And I keep leaning into that. And then that draws listeners and attention and that continues to grow, right? By leaning into that. And that's the way you want to think about it.
I love that because that's how I've been thinking about it. I've been part of a lot of different coaching groups that don't really think about it that way. And it didn't really feel right. I couldn't figure out why I wasn't getting what they were trying to explain to me very well.
So for particularly those that like come from that engineering background, like you want to help people with their problems. Like that's what you want to do, right? I want to help fix your problems. I'm confident I can do it. Okay. But I need to learn about the problems. it's
you gotta have that skill to talk with them, to get out of your shell and listen.
Right. And what I mean is, by the way, like again, just lean into just genuine question asking. And just a lot of listening, a lot of asking questions. Literally, I am describing what is called consultative sales. It is, if you want to get into the methodology, go find a book. Like there's lots of books out there on consultative sales. But it boils down to the idea of listen a lot and ask a lot of questions. In client meetings, if you are talking more than the client, you are probably doing it wrong. And it's actually kind of that simple, right? Because you need to set up a situation where you are asking questions. Think, by the way, about the situation that we have, even literally in the conversation you and I are having right now. You're asking me a lot of questions. This is your show, but you're asking me a lot of questions to get me to say a lot of
so much feedback.
Right. Think of me as the client, right? You're just trying to understand, because then in the situation of, hey, if you were in the situation of offering these solutions, you've learned a ton about who I am and what I do and what my problems are. And that way, if you can go like, oh, I got an idea. I think I can help you with this. Would that be would that be of interest to you? Oh, if not, okay, no worries, man. I just thought that was an idea.
That reframing is just amazing. Ask the right questions, shut up, take notes, listen. Well, the shut up part is hard for me sometimes, but
Look, we're both podcasters. Guys like us run our mouths a mile a minute. I 100% feel you on this, right? But I realized that, like, in particular, like, I think about it as, from the interview perspective. When I have people on my show, like, I shut up a lot because they're the expert. I want to hear.
I'm
I
learning
want to hear
too.
from them. And you're having the same experience now. Think about it from that conversation perspective. Think about it like at a dinner party. Don't you hate the guy who's like always talking about themselves? But if you ever get stuck, what's the easiest way to help? Just ask questions, right?
Yeah.
If you're ever stuck in a social situation, like, the easiest thing to do is ask questions. Oh, so, like, where'd you go on vacation? What do you do? Do you have any kids? Like, what, how do you and your spouse meet? And you just start learning stuff.
People love to
And
talk
then
about themselves. So when you start asking them, they're like, oh, I have no problem with telling you everything. Here's my social. Here's my dog's name. This give you everything,
100%. And by the way, it's totally true in business too. Particularly if you're thinking about something that you're trying to help, they totally want to talk about their business and the things they're facing. So let them do it. They'll tell you what their pain points are. The more you ask, the more
Yeah.
you can get them to tell you, and then there you go. And that so for particularly for a lot of MSPs, IT services companies, I tell you, lean into consultative sales. The more you do that, the better. And then think of your marketing as I'm going to throw value into the world, so that way people then ask me questions or invite me to answer their question.
I love how you put that. I know some guys out there, they're like, well, I don't know how to ask the right questions. I don't know if it's gonna be a stupid question. I don't know how to talk to them, because some people don't have like that soft skill, they call it, but it's really a hard skill to actually communicate and learn how to ask the right questions. But for me, you just gotta start doing it. Start asking dumb questions, and then they become less dumb. I don't know.
I'm going to push back a little bit on the idea of a dumb question, and I want to
Okay.
reframe again. I want to reframe it a little bit for you.
Okay. Yes, please.
If the interest is genuine, there's no such thing as a dumb question.
Ooh.
Because if you're think about this from like a 5-year-old, right? They're just like super interested in everything, right?
They ask so many questions.
There's so many questions, so many questions. But by the way, like, they're super interested. It's not a dumb question. They just don't understand, right? And so they're asking questions because they want to learn. And anybody that if you're always trying to learn, like, actually sometimes the simplest questions are the best ones, because really smart people can explain things in really elegant ways to simple questions. And by the way, they're flattered you asked. What I like to balance is it isn't a dumb question if you're coming from a genuine interest perspective. So reframe your thinking, ask questions that you genuinely are trying to learn about, and view the experience as, I'm learning, right? I'm going in there. I don't understand this. They know a lot more than I do. So I'm going to ask an expert to explain it to me.
Right.
And then, but then it's not a dumb question because if you're genuinely interested, it's never dumb. And people like helping, just the same way that you as an engineer like helping. They also like helping, and they like being able to take their expertise and add some value to somebody else. It's about thinking about that dynamic.
Now, when you said reframe, when I said dumb question, in my mind, I was thinking of asking questions about the technology, asking how to sell them stuff. That's kind of what I did when I first started out. That's
Fair.
kind of what I
Okay.
meant by a dumb question. So your reframe of that actually works.
Well, and again, we don't want to. I also like to think about these things from the perspective of, hey, we're all constantly learning, right? And so, like,
Yes.
I don't want to. I almost don't even want to use the phrase "dumb question," because it's like what you actually were describing is more like it's not. It doesn't fit the context, right? If you're
Yes.
asking them about their technology, it's just out of place
Oh,
because they're not the expert. They're not the expert in technology. So asking them about the technology is kind of out of place. But I don't know, because I don't know anything about that stuff. But what they do know about is their business. And so you want to make sure that you're asking questions that probe into their area of expertise that they are very good about. And by the way, it's as simple as them. Like,
right.
it's kind of that simple. I'll give you another little sort of fun way of reframing this, because it's
Yeah.
fun to think about. It's fun to think about this. Like, so think about the perspective of gift giving, right? If you're giving somebody a birthday present or something, like, it's great fun, right? Giving gifts is great.
Shit.
It's like such a great feeling. But the only way that works is if someone is open to receive. There's actually two parts in gift giving. You have to give the gift, but the other person has to receive it. And in a way, I want to say, like, they have to give the gift of receiving, right? Because if I give you something and then you're like, yeah, like, it destroys the whole thing, right? But if I get it and I'm like, I accept it, generally, like, this is amazing, thank you. Everybody feels good in the transaction, right?
Sure.
And so I want you to think about it from that perspective. Is you recognize that in order for gift giving to work, you have to be open to receive. Sometimes people get really funny about like accepting things or not wanting that, but recognize that there are two parts to that relationship. Same works in consultative selling, right? They're open to talking to you about that stuff because they want to talk about that. And thus you need to be open to asking, and they're open to receiving. And you think about it that perspective. There are two sides of that. And if everybody's getting the value out of it, it's working really well.
That literally just clicked something in my head for cold calling.
What did it open up?
It just clicked that they have to be, so if you're asking them the right questions and they're open to receive them, they're not going to hang up on you, or they're going to give you more of a response. I want to engage more. Instead of you just call and be like, hey, yeah, I'm an IT guy. I'm trying to sell you something. Do you have time? But you ask them the right questions, they'll be more open to receiving a better response back to them, and they won't give you their time.
100%, exactly, 100%.
Yeah,
like, it's about like like in that cold calling exercise. And again, I don't position myself as a cold calling expert, but again, you've got to make sure that what you're trying to talk to them about is of value to them. Like when you're calling in, like, you should do your homework. I would think for most MSPs, you're not cold calling 1,000 people. You're probably working a list of, 50 or 100 that you're trying to work down. Do your homework, right? Now understand, like, hey, I'm calling you A by C company because I'm really kind of interested in understanding a little bit more about the way bulldozing works. And we'd like to understand, I'm trying to understand a little bit about that market. Can you tell me a little bit about the way, like, you guys work with your clients? Like, is that are you only looking for certain kind of customers? That's something that they're totally going to talk about, right? And then you're asking questions like, hey, I want to understand this a little bit. Oh, and the person on the front line might say, oh, I'm not the right person to talk to about this. Oh, cool. Well, can I talk to who's that person? Can I set up a time to talk to them? I'd really like to understand that business, understand your business a little bit more.
That really connects more at the more of a human level. And that gets them kind of like, okay, yeah, they're interested. I want to engage.
Right. And they may say like, hey, we don't have time for that. Okay, cool. Like, maybe I'll try back in a couple of months. Like, but that you want to have a conversation about them to understand their needs so that you can then identify the areas where you may be able to help.
I love that. You said do the research on them. Yes.
100%.
Well. Thank you so much. That just really helped me with some stuff in my head right now that I've been kind of dealing with. This is like one of those therapy sessions,
Well, I don't have you laid out on a couch talking about your deepest feelings, but it's certainly a good way of thinking about it.
It is. Brings me to my last thing I really want to talk about is AI and managed service providers and AI for clients. So you're talking earlier about like a strategic business partner. I know, like, I've used AI and I programmed it to be my strategic business partner, and it really gives a lot of insights and information back to me. But sometimes you do need to have a person to kind of help you implement and interpret some of that stuff. If you tell it something, you get it back, doesn't mean you know what to do with it. And it's just like, what are your thoughts on using that as a tool for your MSP?
So there's a lot to unpack there. So you've actually kind of identified the way that I'm thinking about the AI problem is that MSPs, IT services companies, need to be the shepherd for AI for their clients. This is an area which is going to which includes a ton of hype, a ton of noise. Everyone is slapping their own ridiculous spin on this stuff. I fall in the middle on kind of the AI spectrum. I think that there are areas where, particularly in business, I'm already starting to see applications of AI, and I'm thinking generative AI specifically, but AI can be more broadly. But where
Yeah.
I'm looking at this saying, I actually see some value here. Like I actually like in particular, when I talk to people that are working on helping extract data from systems, being able to do it with natural language processing and ask a database to tell me about data and getting it back opens up a lot of interesting ways to use your data in ways that weren't easy to do before. Either it was pre-canned reports or bad report builders, but now we can actually help people like natural language talk with their data. There's some really interesting stuff that can happen there. And I think there's going to be some really good unlocks. But there's also a lot of craziness going on in here. And
Security with it. I mean, shoot, it's like phenomenal.
And by the way, there's some real underlying risks that we have to manage here too. The models themselves, we're not entirely sure, kind of past the copyright fair use regulation. These things might implode a little bit. A lot of these model providers aren't even making any money. Like there's a lot of stuff that we want to be skeptical about. But at the same time, I think there is something here. And I think in business in particular, I'm starting to see ways where we can do applications of this, particularly, I think there are usage of it. So MSPs and IT services companies have a really interesting opportunity to be the shepherd of making sure that this is done in a way that makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of overspending on AI right now. Everyone's throwing money at this stuff to see what happens. But like 40% of these pilot projects are instantly failing. There's some real failure points in here. And so what we want to make sure is first of all, with an MSP, that you are looking at this with a critical eye and saying, I am trying to identify the use cases that make the most sense for me and for my customers. So you got to start somewhat with yourself, right? And
yes.
I tend to like the phrase drink your own champagne versus eat your own dog food, because I want to drink my own champagne, thank you, instead. So I'm going to look for ways that I can use this in my business and that I can take those applications and do it. So for example, if you're a Microsoft partner, I think you want to be playing with Copilot. I think you want to figure out like, what value can I extract from this? And then what can I use to make this work with customers? You also need to understand that they are playing too. And one of the areas that I think is an immediate opportunity is to work with customers about policies, because you need to help your customers define what AI policies work. Because by the way, the two extremes do not work. You're not able to just say, go forth and use everything. It's a bad idea, right? Bad idea. You're going to get into compliance issues. You're going to get into data privacy issues. But if you turn around to clients and say, my advice is don't touch it. Okay, well, first off, people are going to play with it themselves. So what we're actually finding is some of the best implementations are the ones where organizations have said, hey, we want to give you sandboxes. We want to give you parameters. We want you to play with it within these bounds. We want to teach you that, by the way, you need to understand this stuff about what happens with the data, that if you give it to the model, a public model, it may just get sucked in. So maybe we want to have, only use the Copilot one because we've set it up in a way where it's not going to learn on your data and it's safe for you to use, and you now have an implementation you can play with. Or, by the way, we need to make sure that we have a framework. For example, in my business, I literally have an AI policy posted on my website so that my listeners know I have accountability for every single thing that gets published, right? So I may use AI to help me with writing, but ultimately the responsibility for every word that gets published is on me. Well, that means that I have care with I'm doing checking, I'm doing fact checking, I'm doing I am responsible for that. I'm not abdicating my response. And if you think about that, if you're setting those things up, you're well positioned in a world of agentic AI if it comes all the way to pass. And I'm a little skeptical, right? I got to get eye for it. But some of this may. But we don't want to necessarily live in a world where just the software is off running on its own. No, we have to have responsibility for it. And we're going to need to tie that back. And if we are already laying the groundwork by these policies and thoughts, you're engaging with your customer, you're answering their question, you're giving them a safe way to experiment, to start exploring the technology together, find the uses, and then lean into that. That's my thinking on where the most value is. And I'll tell you, I'm practicing what I preach. I'm literally publishing a video. I'm publishing a video on my channel where I'm going to walk through exactly how I use AI in the production of my show. Like I'm going to show my listeners, like, hey, this is where I'm using it because I want to be transparent. This is what's working for me. This is what's not working for me. Like, this is how you can understand where it works, to just give you an example of how it's getting used.
Ooh, I love that. You said about setting the policies up and then really being that person to help them kind of build that AI program into their business. Because so many, like I work in healthcare, And that's the one thing you have to be so careful, especially with the data, because not our data, it's actually people's data. It's a PII.
Yep.
And like, we
And
don't
if
know where that stuff is going.
And it fits exactly with what you're doing, by the way. So if you're already talking
Yeah.
to customers about their data, and I mean, by the way, compliance is, I mean, I like the space, but I want to put it in value of like, hey, customer, this is stuff we got to think about. You're in this business, there are laws, we got to make sure you're doing that. And my
What
job is to
laws?
make, that's the way this stuff works, right? So I'm going to lean into working with you. That's what compliance is about. I want to make sure your business runs well. This is the risk we've got to mitigate. That's the stuff we do. Fit AI into that conversation, right? We already have a lot of the frameworks of the stuff that works. We need to think about not putting out PII into these large language models. That seems like a bad idea. it's
Just a little bit.
just a little bit, but there's a lot of stuff where this isn't new. This is areas we've explored before. So just fit them to the stuff that you're doing, extend your existing conversation, and go from there.
Very well said. I'm actually take you up on some of that advice myself, working on building some policies for some of my clients and stuff. 'Cause they're always asking me about it, trying to
Drink
figure
your
it
own
out.
champagne, sir. Drink your own champagne.
Yeah.
Like it's
I've actually played with it a lot of different ways and within my business, trying to figure some things out. And just you really need almost like you need like an in-house AI, so it's not going out with all your business information. Once it's
and
out there, it's out there.
But by the way, you've exactly described what you and your customers need and how you match them to that solution. That is the conversation
Yeah.
that you want to be having, right? Is because that's that's the value section. And because by the way, some businesses, I think the smaller the business are, the more likely their interaction with AI is going to be via SaaS, right? So they're going to need to figure out the way that it's done via, could be a ChatGPT, could be a Copilot, could be Gemini, could go that way. It could be agentic AI that starts getting built into the SaaS software that they use, right? It could come that way. But by the way, think about it just from the perspective, if you're a Microsoft 365 user, you get Copilot now, right? So that's a SaaS delivery of that. And you're going to need to think about the way that that gets used effectively. The smaller companies are going to be doing it via SaaS. The larger the company gets, the more I'm expecting that to be a specialized model or a specialized implementation. And there probably will also be some opportunity for hybrids, where in some cases it's delivered through the SaaS and other times it's delivered, through something on premise.
Yes, I know there's a lot of people out there trying to figure out not just policies for companies, but also policies for regulations and stuff for it as well right now. It's kind of
Yes.
like the wild, wild west a little bit.
And by the way, like, I see a lot of similarities to the early internet in this conversation, right? Is that
Yeah.
there was a lot of chaos back then. A lot of people crashed and burned. Everything was going to change
Did we learn
overnight.
something though?
Well, no, because we never do. But at the same time, we can look at the historical trends and get a sense of like, this stuff does happen, but it happens way slower than we all think, with a lot more collateral damage than we think. Because so by the way, like, here's a classic example. Everyone likes to pick on pets.com, right? Remember the sock puppet and the bad idea if you were around in the late 90s and early 2000s? Pets.com will deliver everything online. Well, now that's called Chewy, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
25 years later, the business idea actually does work. It was just far too early. So a lot of the stuff you're hearing right now, I'm expecting a lot of this stuff to crash and burn. But that doesn't mean that there aren't elements of this that are what we're going to see over the next 5, 10, 15 years that we want to start understanding and leaning into and figuring out what's the good stuff, what's the bad stuff. Let's not overextend ourselves into stuff that doesn't make sense. Let's focus on, again, back to where we just started. What
Yes.
can we do with customers that helps them spend their money and get a little bit more out of their technology? If we get that lens, we will always find things that work.
That is so true and very well said. Damn, I have a lot for myself to think about how to redirection my MSP and bring more value to people. Because like I'm learning still, I'm still new.
Well,
But like I'm
you're
glad I'm starting now than
Justin, all
before.
of us are always learning. There's always learning. I'm going to give you my one favorite book on this topic is I'm
Yes.
a big fan of The Go-Giver. It's Bob Burg's book. It's a short little book. It's a parable about delivering value stuff. But there's several principles of it. It's a great read. It take you 2 hours. It's like easy. But one of the things that resonates with his principles of being a go-giver is deliver more value than you charge. That if you're
Ooh,
always thinking about it, I deliver more value than I charge, that you will always grow and you will always be needed. Right.
I
And
love that.
so you want to make sure that you're just that's where, like, again, back to my marketing conversation, the way I think about sales is I'm just always about delivering value. Can I always deliver value? Can I deliver value? Can I deliver value? Can I deliver value? And by the way, people will pay for value.
I just want to help people, so I want to be valuable.
Right. And so
So
the
I
more you
get
do
that.
that, the more they will happily turn around and go, you know what, Justin, I want to give you a big bag of money. Here you go. Here's a big bag of money for all the things you've helped. Right. And we go from there. And that's the way you want to think about it is can I deliver additional value? That go-giver mentality is a good way of thinking about it. It's a great business parable book. It's a good way of framing the way that we're talking about this consultative selling and the way you go out. It's just a good way of thinking about it.
Such valuable information right there. I love that so much because that's kind of the track I'm on, just to deliver value, help people, just be as valuable as I possibly can. I hope others would listen to this and take the advice from us today and go out there and be like, oh, I've been doing it wrong the whole time, but I can still make a change and take these steps to implement that into their business as well.
It's again, don't dwell on the past. I also like to reframe that thing. Is not that you've been doing it wrong. It's that you're learning along the way. Every little step is another little lesson. I just want to be a little bit better tomorrow than I was today, and I
Yes.
want today to be a little bit better than yesterday. And if I keep doing that every single day, wow, in over the journey, I'm going to make sure that everything is significantly improved.
Then you become invaluable.
Then you become invaluable, and that's how you become an expert, and that's how you become like really embedded in your field, and that's how you become that kind of business that people want to do business with.
Yes. Oh, so well said. I want to thank you, Dave, for coming on here today. It's been such valuable information. I got like a lot of good nuggets out of this.
Well, I
Like
am
I'm at
here to
this.
help. I'm always here to help, Justin. I love this space. I love helping anybody that's
Yeah.
running a technology company. I'm trying to put some value out into the world and help everybody every way that I can.
Yes. And we appreciate that so much. If people would love to find your channel or reach out to you, where can they find you?
So I keep all the links to everything that I do at the website businessof.tech. You can subscribe to my podcast. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can find me on LinkedIn. But all the links are right there, easy to find on businessup.tech. And I always tell everyone the number one thing they can do to help and support me is literally just following on whatever platform makes the most sense. If you're a podcast person, follow there. If you're a YouTube person, subscribe to the channel, give me that thumbs up. That's the stuff that really helps me grow my business and to continue to deliver.
Thank you. I'll definitely put that down in the show notes as well. And is there any last things you'd like to leave our audience with before we go today?
You know, Justin, we've done such a really good job of talking about all these different topics. Again, it's every little small step. I'll leave with the last silly joke. What's the easiest way to eat an elephant?
I give up.
One bite at a time.
Damn.
It's all about that. So again, all of this just one bite at a time. Just keep doing it.
I love that. Thank you so much, Dave, for coming on here. I definitely have to have you back. Maybe do a collaboration in the future.
Oh, looking forward to it, Justin. I'll come back anytime.
Yeah, so you have a good rest of your day, Dave, and thank you so much.
Thank you.